Thank you, Member. Recognizing the Minister of State for Infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Honourable Chair. It is my honour to be able to rise today to speak in support of Bill Number 5, entitled Workers' Compensation Amendment Act 2022. And can I begin my remarks by thanking the Minister of Labour for making this work a priority and making sure that this actually got through. There have been so many improvements to the Workers' Compensation Act, to worker safety, to Employment Standards Act that make life better for workers here in this province, and it has been a long, long time since we have had a champion like the Minister of Labour for working people. So before I became an MLA, as people may know, I worked as a professional engineer managing projects as an owner's project engineer out at the Vancouver Airport Authority. And now in my role now as Minister of State for Infrastructure, I get the honour of working with the Honourable Minister of Transportation Infrastructure to deliver a lot of transportation projects, the vast majority of which are more like horizontal construction projects, although this bill does have some relevance there as well, because I'll note that asbestos was used in asphalt back in between the 1960s and 1980s as well. Now, working on horizontal construction has been just really rad, I have to say. But back when I was working at the Vancouver Airport Authority, the kind of projects I was primarily involved in was vertical construction. I was primarily involved in terminal expansion and redevelopment projects. Now, I have to say that the pandemic has changed a lot of things for airports around the world. I really need to acknowledge that, and I think of all of the people who have spent so much of their life working and supporting their families through work at these airports, and I know that it's a very difficult time for them. When I joined them many years ago, though, well before the pandemic, it really was an engineer's dream job to work there. You had runway rehabilitation programs that could employ you for a lifetime, ridiculously cool conveyor belt systems that move baggage along underneath the airports. You had enough baggage systems under the airport building to stretch from YVR all the way down to downtown and back again. And of course, it was all jumbled up and, well, not jumbled, it was very coordinated and organized down there, but I have to say a huge pain in the ass to install and take apart, but very cool. And also you had very complex building.
The appropriate term might be pain in the butt.
Pain in the butt. Yeah. I retract my former comment, pain in the butt. And you also had very complex building expansion and redevelopment projects as well. Now, the other thing that the YVR airport terminal had a lot of, especially when you were talking about the older buildings, was asbestos, which also meant that when you were impacting those areas, you needed to do a lot of asbestos abatement. And I remember the safety training that we got when I first started working there as a young engineer in training. And I remember that the safety trainer came up, he was presenting in front of a whole bunch of us, and he said, asbestos is an amazing material. It is fireproofing properties or something to behold. It makes materials strong and long-lasting. He pauses. And he says it's also the leading cause of workplace deaths in BC. We have to let that sink in. Asbestos is the #1 killer of workers in British Columbia today. It causes cancer. A rare and aggressive cancer called mesothelioma. That is, let me say that one more time because I have trouble pronouncing it, mesothelioma. That is almost exclusively caused by asbestos exposure. It gets into the lungs, it accumulates in the body with every exposure, and we don't know how to reverse the damage that it causes. Now, I was very fortunate because working out at YVR, their safety program was extraordinarily stringent. And we didn't take hazardous materials lightly. When your project involves demolishing the oldest part of the main terminal, you better believe that there were a lot of hazardous materials to deal with. There was asbestos in the gypsum board, lead in the paint on the tiles, and a lot of rodent droppings, which you also had to deal with as a hazardous material. I remember that there was this room that I needed to demolish, and because it was quite an old room, the floors had been redone many, many times. So under the carpet, there were ceramic tiles, and under the ceramic tiles, there was linoleum tiles, and under the linoleum tiles was the concrete deck. The ceramic tiles tested for lead, the linoleum tiles tested for asbestos, and the carpet dust was probably made up of rodent droppings, quite frankly. The whole building was like this. And systematically off we had to go through this whole building that we were about to demolish, testing, setting up containments, sending in trained abatement contractors, doing air quality testing, monitoring the work, bagging, tagging, making sure everything was properly disposed of and that everyone was safe. Fortunately for us, there were a lot of highly skilled abatement contractors and abatement consultants out there who would work with us. We had contractors who would suit up, stepped into sealed bubbles that no one else would be allowed to without a full hazmat suit before they were done. And we had consultants who would come in and act as third-party monitors for the work. They would take a look at the rooms, they would check, they would identify materials that needed testing, make sure that it was done properly. I have to really give them credit. The consultant that I had the privilege of working with was RJ and Associates Environmental Consulting, led by Richard Connolly and Andrew Marshall, who now leads the company. And they were absolute pros, absolutely uncompromising on the value of high safety, safe work practices. If we broke into a material that we hadn't tested and that we hadn't set up abatement containments for, they would shut us down. And that was the right thing to do. But it also meant that we were extremely incentivized to get everything done right the first time. And you know what? That is what it takes to do abatement right, to keep workers safe and to ensure that you're not exposing people outside public, members of the public, to asbestos as well. Now, as the Minister of Labour has already discussed, sadly, not everyone does abatement right. Sadly, not everyone even knows that asbestos has to be treated with such care. And that kind of culture of complacency and non-compliance in many parts of the industry has been killing people. So at long last, we are bringing in a licensing requirement for asbestos abatement contractors, something that will save lives and reward and recognize those contractors who are already doing things right. And this will protect them from being undercut by companies that aren't doing things right. And we're bringing in a requirement that asbestos abatement workers and others will have to complete mandatory asbestos safety training so that they fully understand what it is that they must do to do things properly. Or, pardon me, why they must do things properly. Being educated means that you know when you're at risk, when something needs to get sent for testing, when you experience that shortness of breath and wheezing and crackling of the lungs that indicates that you may have been exposed to asbestos. Now, inevitably, and I'm actually very grateful that the official opposition did not ask this, I'm so grateful that we are likely to have support from all sides of the House. But inevitably, someone out there is going to ask, doesn't it cost more to do asbestos abatement properly? And let me tell you this, right now people are paying for this with their lives. Fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, friends, they continue to die today because 10, 15, 20 years ago, they worked on a project or multiple projects and had no idea that their employer should have been hiring a proper abatement contract to make the site safe for them before they went in. And I think of all of the men and women that I had worked with on these construction sites, hundreds and hundreds of them at a time in some cases. And I think of their families. People with, I remember, I think of their children. You know, Craig with his 2 young girls who he took so much pride in, he was so excited or so looking forward to walking them down the aisles in 10, 15 years. You know, I think about Don with his wife who's pregnant, and the children that he wants to have in his family, and Debbie with her children. And I imagine them in 10, 15, 20 years. Gosh, I didn't think that would do this. There are, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of workers out there who have had their lives cut short by this. Oh, this is so embarrassing. Thank you so much. Dozens and dozens of workers, we lose them every year because of something that happened decades ago that they never would have been able to know about. I think it will mean a lot to everybody who works in the construction industry and everyone with family members in the industry to know that they have a government out there who cares about them, not just government, that they have legislators throughout the province on both sides of the House who have said, enough is enough, we're putting an end to this. Your safety matters, and your life is worth so much more than we could ever put a value on. I'm going to stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister.